So what is up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new DCU Chapter 1 discussion series video. And we actually haven't done a DCU widespread dedicated discussion series video since around March. Sure, we've done Superman ones, a DCU Batman one, but a widespread version where we can talk about, I don't know, freaking Wonder Woman being fast-tracked, to Teen Titans being put on hold, to the DCU Batman stuff out there, to Lanterns, to basically whatever. That is what we're doing today. So I got you guys to submit a bunch of things that you wanted to be discussed in this video, and we are going to dive into it. You should know how we do this here. I hope you go on to enjoy the video. I hope you enjoy the nerd out we're about to have. If you're brand new here and you like DC, this is the place for you. You are in the right place. Consider subscribing, because around 43% of you who watch these videos, apparently according to my analytics, on a regular basis aren't subscribed. So maybe today is the day you'll consider subscribing. And if you go on to enjoy the video, do me a favor and help motivate me even more by just leaving a like rating on it. But let's get into the first post here from Gabriel. And this one actually has caught a bit of interest recently, saying the recent comments about the status of Wonder Woman and the Flash in the DCU, considering he said both are not canon as of yet. So does that mean an origin story for both or either one of these characters? Not sure, just a thought though. So a lot of people have been talking about what Gunn said recently over on the Peacemaker podcast. If you didn't know already, there is a Peacemaker podcast where, before breaking season 2 episodes down, they're going over a rewatch of season 1. And when they were covering episode 6, we have Steve Agee mention the part in the episode where the kids mention Flash and Wonder Woman. So of course, the canon of that gets brought up. And this is exactly what James Gunn said.
Wonder Woman and Flash are mentioned in here by the kids.
Yeah, are they canon? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, they'll exist eventually. Whether they exist now, I don't know.
So what he meant by that is, of course, it's not that Wonder Woman and Flash aren't canon in the DC universe, but were they existing at the time of the events of when these kids technically mentioned Flash and Wonder Woman during Peacemaker season 1. So all while a lot of canon of Peacemaker, in fact, most of it is canon to season 2, just like how we had Rick Flag die at the hands of Peacemaker in the Suicide Squad, and that's canon. Are these comments technically canon? He was like, I don't know, but he does immediately after that go on to say, because he probably realized what people would take out of that, I mean, they'll exist eventually, but whether they exist now, I don't know. But where will James Gunn truly end up with it? Where will Ana Nogueira, or how will she write this into the script? Because I would argue, maybe, just maybe, they might go with the route in where Wonder Woman didn't actually come to the world of man before World War I or World War II, and she might only come about and emerge as Wonder Woman and leave Themyscira in present day, maybe after the events of Peacemaker season 1. Now, that's not my preference, by the way. It's not like I would hate it or anything. My preference is to have Diana quite a lot older than that and actually come to the land of man, if you will. So, you know, she would have interacted with the Justice Society of America and all of this stuff. But then we had the Metahuman mural, or the Hall of Justice hero mural, to be more accurate, because technically not every single one of those characters was a metahuman. And one thing that came out of that mural detailing the history of heroes in the DCU is that there were some characters that weren't featured on there that we would have thought absolutely would have been. And one of those is Diana Wonder Woman. Just because, you know, her feats, or some feats of the past, you know, would have been noticed to some extent. You know, just like a lot of heroes that were featured on that mural were around during the time of World War II. There's lots of All-Star Squadron members that can, as we've speculated about before, even featuring Sergeant Rock. That would be awesome. But how is Wonder Woman not on there when we have an exiled Amazon featured on the mural, Exoristos? And if you haven't seen my Metahuman mural breakdown, I'll leave that video pinned in the cards or whatever you pin it in these days on YouTube. But one could argue that the reason Wonder Woman wasn't on that mural is because she actually hasn't left Themyscira at this point in time, which, depending on the iteration in the comics, could be fairly accurate, because you could have Diana be thousands of years old, leave Themyscira in the early 20th century and help out then, but you could also maybe not have that in more recent iterations where she only emerges as of not too long ago. Now, I do completely understand the argument at the same time, for those of you who may be thinking this. What if she was around back then, but her activities were kind of low-key, so they weren't really recorded? I totally hear you there, but still, I think, hearkening this back to what James Gunn said, whether they exist now, like as in the kids mentioning, hey, have you met Wonder Woman? Have you met Flash? What is that canon being carried over? Because that is quite significant. If a child knows about Wonder Woman, like they would have when this line was made in the DCEU, like people knew about Wonder Woman because she had public feats quite often from her time in the DCEU's past to present day. Is that being carried over to the DCU? As I mentioned before, probably it's because of a real world we're literally figuring this out. Anna's writing the script right now for Wonder Woman. Now, I would love to know how you would prefer it to be. Are you more in line with me and how you like more of an older Wonder Woman? Or are you actually more down to have a Wonder Woman only leave Themyscira in recent days? Another thing that I forgot to mention that you could technically chuck into this is that Themyscira in the canon of the DCU as it stands right now in Creature Commandos was more of a place that wasn't like proper confirmed, like they thought they knew about it. Some people like that professor knew about it. When it was on the news, it was like supposedly this island of women and stuff like, so it wasn't like fully known about. It was more like, okay, we think this is a thing. There was no Wonder Woman mentioned, so maybe you could argue that they hadn't learned too much about Themyscira, because maybe one day they will, when there's this new thing to the people of the DCU where it's like, oh, one of the women has left the island to come here, and look at how she helps out, and she calls herself Wonder Woman. Something along those lines would be an execution of this iteration of the character in the DCU that I would believe in how they would approach things. Now, speaking of Wonder Woman, we have Young for Life is saying, hey Boba, first off, I want to start by saying I love your channel and the amazing content you put out. You are definitely in my top 3 go-to subscribers for YouTube. And yes, I am subscribed. Now, I have 2 questions. Thank you, by the way. First, do you think, since Wonder Woman is being fast-tracked for her own movie, do you think we'll see her make an appearance before her film? And the second part of the question, I believe, is for the Batman Part 2, so I'll save that for the discussion series over there. But as for Wonder Woman, could we see her make an appearance before her film? I don't know about that one. I mean, I always consider this when it comes to the Trinity, I suppose. I mean, obviously, we've already got Superman, but, with Batman as a whole, will they actually show Batman before the Brave and the Bold? Like, hypothetically, obviously, this depends on if the DC Batman is separate, and that is maintained as separate, because obviously if you want to go down the line of Pattinson merging with the DCU, then technically you've already seen him if you want to go down that conspiracy rabbit hole. But if he's separate, then, with how it currently stands, with us getting the Batman 2, and, DCU Brave and the Bold being separate things, you wouldn't be able to really get a DCU Brave and the Bold Batman movie out before the Batman 2's release date. And given that that's gearing up for production early next year by spring, it makes one think, well, obviously Brave and the Bold will at least be 2028 at the earliest. So therefore, are they really going to wait that long? So maybe we could see Batman, DCU Batman, in something like Clayface or something else that they put out. I know people are really split on that theory, so the same applies to Wonder Woman, but I think they might save Wonder Woman's debut in live action for her movie, because I think one could argue they could maybe possibly get Wonder Woman out in 2027, just if they follow the swift behind-the-scenes process for writing that movie, just like Supergirl. Again, look at the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow example. That literally took off like a rocket, from the writing to the pre-production phase to casting and all of that. So, given that we have the Batman 2 coming out 2027 October, the other DC movie of that year, DCU one, could be Wonder Woman, and since that is a movie that's likely going to explore a part of her origin, you would have to think, in this iteration of the DCU, you might as well maybe save it for there, since in the grand scheme of things, 2027 isn't too far off. And, are you really going to include Wonder Woman in another project when we could just see her in her own first movie in the DCU in 2027, maybe even around the summer, right? Now, I say origin, but it could be her a few years in, just like Superman 3 years in, but her actions haven't been widely recorded yet. Obviously, we're gonna have to wait and see for that. I mean, just like we were talking about with the first question. But as for her making an appearance before then, we've got Supergirl next year. Then we've got Clayface. 2027 is the Batman 2. And the other DC movie is kind of unlisted right now. One could argue, is it Gunn's super sort of sequel with maybe Superman and Supergirl? Or with Wonder Woman being fast-tracked, could that be the 2027 movie? But technically, you could also say, even though there's going to be 2 DC movies a year, there might be 3 if they want to technically do the Batman 2, October, but Elseworlds, right? But there's still maybe 2 slots for DCU movies. So you could argue Wonder Woman and Gunn's super sequel with maybe Supergirl and Superman. But I do think that'd be quite a lot. But then again, maybe not. Because again, I know on paper that sounds like a lot. But technically speaking, the Batman is so distinctly different in every way that it could feel quite detached. Just like if you had 2 MCU movies come out one year and then you had Logan come out in October. Logan would just feel very different from, obviously, the MCU. That would you have really wrote them together under the same banner of, oh my god, we got too many MCU movies or Marvel movies this year? Not necessarily. So I don't know what they're going to do with that. I know we've had them talk about how many theatrical releases they're going to do a year, as well as 2 TV shows and animations and stuff. But I'm just going to say X to doubt for now, with Wonder Woman appearing in the project before her own. That could very well be coming our way, maybe in 2027. Now, kind of already talking about Brave and the Bold, we have Jordan say, how soon do you think we'll actually get Brave and the Bold? Sometimes James Gunn will say something that makes it seem more distant or far off. Other times he'll say something that makes it seem like it's moving faster than we think. So I think Gunn really does want to get this out the gate. He has said things, as Jordan pointed out here, where, he's been talking about how, like, he's a driving force behind it. He's working very closely with the writer for Brave and the Bold, Batman in the DCU, to make sure it's right, to make sure that they're actually moving it along. If you combine this with quotes of old that I think people, quotes of old, this wasn't that long ago, but people kind of forget about, is that, Peter Safran, when asked about a Batman movie in 2027, he said, well, there will be a Batman movie, saying that one way or another, whether it's Matt Reeves' Batman 2 or the DCU Batman, we're going to get it out. So I think they've been gearing it up to get it ready just in case Matt Reeves' Batman at that time, because we know now it is happening. He is literally entering pre-production and going into filming spring next year. But at that time, they were fully preparing to be like, okay, well, if Matt Reeves, because of this, that, and the other XYZ, can't get Batman off the ground as soon as we'd like him to for that 2027 October slot, we're gearing up Batman in the DCU for the Brave and the Bold movie. So I do think that they have been gunning hard for the DCU Batman movie. But as I said, as it currently stands, the Batman 2 is going to meet its October 2027 release date. So to put it plainly, James Gunn's already said, and I think we all agree with this, they're not going to release 2 Batman movies in the same calendar year, like the same theatrical year. That makes complete sense. Even though one is Elseworlds and one is DCU mainline canon, yeah, let's kind of avoid that. So, I think since we know the Batman 2's got its 2027 October slot, they're not going to get Brave and the Bold out by next year. So, if it's not releasing next year, it's not releasing in 2027, well then, it's 2028 at the very earliest, right? But there is still the question that I'm kind of, I think, a lot more open to than other people, in how, since we know we're waiting that long for a Batman in the DCU, I wouldn't mind seeing him feature in another project. If that means they have to cast the actor a little bit sooner to have a relevant role. Clayface would make sense. I don't think you should distract or steal the thunder from that character's movie, but you can make it work. I really do believe you can. People's argument to that idea would be that if they kept it under lock and key, but still featured him towards the end, that Warner Brothers wouldn't do that because they wouldn't be able to resist marketing Batman in the trailers, because they would want Clayface to do well. So if, like, you have, hey, there's a DCU Batman, even if we're not promising anything too big, you'll still get to see him in this movie in the trailers, and they tease it in some way, shape, or form. Would they be able to resist doing that? I don't know. Again, I see both sides of the argument. And technically, Batman could, or Bruce Wayne could, appear in another project of whatever that would be. But admittedly, we do have limited projects releasing in the next couple of years until 2028. So there's only so many that he could really work in. But you never know. You really never know. They could even include a little cool thing where they might not have cast the actor yet, but they do a shot of from behind of Bruce Wayne, like in the suit at his computer or something in a Wayne office. And he sees a story or a headline of this mud monster, and you see him press a button or something, and he's going to go to the Batcave. Something like that would be epic. Everyone would know what it means. It's not a pointless scene, because I know some people would say, oh, what's the point if you're not going to cast the actor doing it from behind like that? But they could, and people would still freak the hell out. I know I would. Like, if you're in Bruce Wayne's office in Wayne Enterprises, and then he sees something, and he's got, like, he flips a button, or the statue, or something like that, to then go to the Batcave, knowing what you know he's going to do next to try and apprehend Clayface, or he's going to look into it even more. It's showing that, hey, he's out there. He's getting to business. We know we're going to see him in DCU Batman's The Brave and the Bold, but Clayface has caught his attention. We know who this character is. It's a very minimal aperitif to DCU Batman, but hey, that was pretty damn cool. I don't see how Warner Brothers, or DC Studios rather, would resist doing that at the very least. At this point, if you're not going to see Batman actually jump in like a... And I've always likened it to how you had Ben Affleck's Batman trying to apprehend Harley and Joker in the Suicide Squad. A very, very minimal scene. If they're not going to do that, which I would understand, I think we can, kind of all agree there maybe they might not do that. They might still do the other thing, where, you kind of see Bruce Wayne from behind in that rough example I gave you. I would actually really like that. It'd be something to chew on until we actually get the Brave and the Bold movie. Up next from Maximum Gaming with Max saying, what would you like to see for the first Justice League movie? Lineup, main villain. I would love to see Vandal Savage in something. Would love to hear your thoughts. That's something I've been saying for the past couple of years. I've made videos previously like who would be the big bad of the DCU. Now we understand it to be the case of where Gunn has said that, will there be kind of big bads for a certain set of movies? Like, yes, but, they're more world building than story building, in the sense that, like, I don't think they're going to obsess over an overarching big bad, like the Anti-Monitor is coming, like Thanos turning around on the chair, gearing up from movie 1 onwards. But that's not to say that there won't be big bads as such that could be a part of a few movies that amount into something that is big badish. I know that's like a very convoluted way of explaining it, and to be honest, like, it has been kind of convoluted since the beginning, because we have been aware since the DCU Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters announcement that, for example, Lanterns is a very important show to their overarching story in the DCU, which makes it pretty damn clear that there is an overarching story. So either way, I don't know, man. But I would still love a villain like, obviously, Brainiac. I don't think he should be a one-and-done villain, and what I mean by that is, you introduce him in the first movie that you see him in, and then you punch him over the head or whatever you do, and he's done. That's just, no, he's more of an overarching story villain, right? So would Vandal Savage. And Vandal Savage, as I mentioned as one of my candidates for that DCU big bad villain video I did a long while ago now, is that he is so rooted in history, and he's influenced events throughout history because he's lived through history. That would be so cool. Arguably, he'd kind of be an ancient horror in a way because of how formidable he is. It depends how they adapt him with how powerful he has been known to be in the comics, but Vandal Savage would be epic, or at least at some point in time, if they ever touch Vandal Savage, that would be so cool. Also, I think because he's not like mainstream popular in the sense of Brainiac or Darkseid or the Anti-Monitor or something like that, I'm not saying he's an unpopular character in DC Comics, but it would introduce a new interesting character to the general audiences who may not be so familiar with. They might be like, who's Vandal Savage? But because of how interesting his character is, and because of his, if you look into his comic origins through how long he's lived and how he's impacted certain events in history and how he's accumulated so much power and connections like that, you would believe that he could actually have orchestrated something, or could be formidable in so many ways, or make things difficult for those who go against him in future movies. But at the same time, would love Brainiac, obviously. A longer arc story there would be really cool. Maybe one in where they feel like they sorted him out, but that was just a clone of Brainiac, or like a drone of Brainiac, and there's much more than what they ever realized. Obviously, there's other contenders like Mongol, Warworld. That would be pretty mad, and I think very applicable to the DCU. Like, if you literally had Warworld park up, you know, in the solar system, and like Superman and Batman, and everyone's like, oh, damn, like, what are we gonna, like, that is just that, okay, but that is so fantastical to what the DCU is doing with what we've even seen in Superman, that this would be fairly believable. Another favorite of mine, but this is why I think Gunn explained it, and how there are big bads for, like, and I'm really paraphrasing here, but he said, like, for like some projects, so it almost seems grouped in ways. Like, you might have a dump of a few projects here throughout a few years of the DCU, and there might be a cohesive big bad amongst those. So while you might have those, you still might have a very much so longer cooked up one, and I think that could be awesome to have the Legion of Doom. We know Lex Luthor, according to Safran's, a major player, and we will be seeing him again. So I don't know, like, if I would want to see the Legion of Doom right away, because I want Lex to cook in the background over years. Like, obviously, this is all dependent on DC Studios and their success with DCU projects in the box office, and, you know, and other places like Max and HBO. But, you know, if all goes well there, I think, you know, learning that Luthor is recruited, like Grodd, to, you know, how cool would it be if you had Eobard Thawne there as well, and other villains like that. That would be, like, truly a threat that would be insane. Like, can you actually imagine Luthor, Warsuit Luthor, Grodd, Eobard Thawne, to others against Justice League characters? That is a Justice League level threat. Now, not saying the others aren't, like Brainiac and other characters, but when you have multiple hero antagonists that caused enough issues for each individual hero, but all of them united against all these mainline heroes of the Justice League, that would be mental, absolutely mental. And I would be willing to wait 6 to 8 years if it meant having a long serve up to something like that. So Film Nerd 12 says, I would love to see the Justice Society, but how would it fit in? Who would be one of the members? And when did Hal Jordan become Green Lantern? Was it the 70s or 80s? I love your videos. And also, before I forget, why did James Gunn delay Sergeant Rock? Is this going to tell something in a Justice League movie? So quite a few questions there. So first of all, I would love to see the Justice Society. Me too. As you guys know, one of my most wanted projects in the DCU is, long story short, the same way they announced the Sergeant Rock movie to be kind of a prequel, standalone project in the DCU, following Sergeant Rock in World War II, with potentially G.I. Robot and maybe some of those heroes we see in the Metahuman mural in the Hall of Justice. I would also love a prequel to the heroes of old in the DCU, like some of those we saw on the Metahuman mural, but solely about the Justice Society and what they got up to in the 1940s. That would be epic. That would be absolutely epic. But how would they fit in? That is the question. How? This is something I'm still kind of irritated about, because there's certain, I can't be firm about it because there's so many excuses they could give as to why they would still be in the DCU's history, but we didn't see them. So let me get into this from the beginning. We didn't see them on the mural in the Hall of Justice. We saw Ted Grant. We technically saw, you know, a couple of others like Sandman and whatnot, but how do you not include Jay Garrick in there? How do you not include Owlman in there? How did you not sprinkle Starman in there? Even if it's like the original Ted Knight. Like, there's so many characters that they could have included in the DCU's History of Heroes mural that they just didn't. Now, I really appreciate the deeper dives that Gunn decided to put in there, but he still refrained from showing those characters. So how would they fit in? Well, there could still be literal JSA lineup characters like Jay Garrick and the heroes I just mentioned that were around in the 1940s. But, as I mentioned earlier, maybe Maxwell Lord didn't like those heroes that much as the other heroes, so he chose not to put them on the Metahuman mural. It could be as simple as that. They could easily write that away. Again, it's really important to remember Maxwell Lord owns the Hall of Justice. He owns the Justice Gang. They're corporate. We even had a painting being made of the current Justice Gang members in the background of that scene where Lois is speaking to Mr. Terrific, Hawkgirl, and Guy Gardner. And so the mural up there isn't like, I would say, the most reliable information about the history of heroes in the DCU. I would definitely stand by that. I think it's definitely reliable in those heroes, like the ones that are on it have been around. Doesn't mean that incorporates every single last hero, does it? So that's one way. But if I was Gunn, I just would have included all those heroes. In addition to Wildcat, I would have put these other heroes on there. You had Max Mercury, why not? Why not have Jay Garrick? Why not show Hourman? Why not show Starman, like, you know, with his staff, like in the sky of the Metahuman mural at some point? That it just would have made so much sense. It also, you know, none of us would have expected, you know, something to be made of these characters just because they're on the mural. So I want to get that out the way, but you can still put them on there, right? I could ramble and actually kind of low-key rant about that one forever, but I do want to say that how would they fit in? Well, you could also argue kind of similar to what the DCEU did. You could have the Justice Society in present day. I don't think they would do that, though, because we've already got a Justice Gang, which is like the proto-Justice League that is being built up over time. So I don't see them doing a JSA present-day project alongside a literal Justice Gang that are currently occupying the Hall of Justice. So if there is a Justice Society thing, I think it would be like what we've seen where we saw Wildcat on the mural. For some reason or another, there are the other heroes out there, but they just weren't on the mural. Hell, maybe we will never get a Justice Society thing, but Gunn prefers the All-Star Squadron. And that is kind of like a JSA in of itself, in a way, kind of, back in World War II days, where you had all of these heroes in it, a lot of heroes. And maybe Gunn will do what I pitched with a JSA prequel project in the 1940s, but with the All-Star Squadron. And I would be really down for that, by the way. I really would. Would prefer a JSA one, but I would take what I could get with you know, heroes of that era prequel project. So when did Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan become Green Lantern? I think, you know, it's safe to say that, well, let me put it this way. First of all, just because Kyle Chandler is 59 years old, that does not mean he is 59 in the universe of the DCU. Kyle Chandler, I mean, again, with makeup or whatever, I'm not saying he looks like a wrinkly old man. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, with makeup combined, you could literally put him as in canon universe age of 46 or something like that. So arguably, Hal could still be in his 40s as a Green Lantern. So also, if I remember correctly, Hal Jordan was around in his early to mid 20s, roughly, when he was when he got his Green Lantern ring after Abin Sur died. So let's just say I'm roughly right here with in universe he's 40s, mid 40s, let's just say, or late 40s. Hal, at the very least, would have been, you know, to be deemed a Lantern legend. That is a part of the logline, and I believe that is truly canon to what they're roughly explaining with the premise. He's already established himself as this Lantern legend because he's been a Lantern for so long that he achieved that kind of title. So he's been a Lantern for at least 20 years. I'm very confident about that. 20 years of being a Green Lantern by the time we see him in Lanterns. So in answer to your question, roughly here, when did Hal Jordan become a Green Lantern? I would say, I don't know, sometime around 2003 to 2006. Because, you know, DCU's in present day, let's just say 2025. Yeah, take 20 years off that roughly. Somewhere around then. And your last question, why did Gunn delay Sergeant Rock? This is something that I am still confused about to this day. You know, I'll always try and approach things with Gunn level-headed, where, you know, a lot of people just say, liar, Gunn's a liar. But this one does just confuse me because what we know with the basic ground rules of DC Studios is that they won't greenlight a script until it's ready. And we knew that Sergeant Rock behind the scenes was gaining traction to actually gear up to filming with Luca Guadagnino. They had already kind of attached Colin Farrell to play Sergeant Rock. Like, it was gearing up to go. Then all of a sudden, we heard that it was no longer the case. Initially, from, I believe, Deadline, they said studio sources said that it just wouldn't be ready to film in time because of some weathery kind of things. So it's basically been pushed back. Like, what they would have needed to have done would have needed certain conditions, basically. So they're like, okay, you know, the next year. But then when we were ramping up to Superman, Gunn fully admitted Sergeant Rock is still going forward, but he literally said, and I've got the quote here, what would Peter want me to say here? So it's still moving forward, but yeah, right now it wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be creatively, and so it needs to change a little bit. So again, I'm not trying to call out like harshly here, but how was the script greenlit? And you're not going to greenlight scripts until it's ready yet. The reason why it's actually not moving forward is because the script, the movie, the screenplay wasn't where he wanted it to be creatively, and thus it actually needs to change a little bit. Now, I guess, one thing I want to say, and in fairness to Gunn here, maybe it was greenlit initially, and is he allowed to change his mind? Yes, completely. That's just something that's just a bit hard to, I guess, digest because, I think with Gunn's high bar and, clear stance on movies going forward at DC, he would have still read that script, re-reviewed it, read it before pushing the green button to go forward, like, okay, we're going to kind of do this, right? Maybe, since we also know that Luca Guadagnino is no longer attached, maybe there was some creative differences that we'll never learn about publicly, but along the way where he initially liked the idea, there was still further, gelling around with a few things that were in flux, and it was like, okay, this isn't really working or where I wanted it to be creatively, so, or while we're moving forward with it, things do need to change. I think it's probably that situation. Like somewhere in that influxiness of things, it basically had to take a step back. It's been pushed back. They're still very much so wanting to make it. Gunn even, again, reaffirmed that in that interview with Josh Horowitz not too long ago, as in a few weeks ago. So up next, we have Jonah Jameson6765 saying, I assume you've heard the news about the Weapons director writing a Joker and Harley movie script? I think it's said to be from the point of view of a henchman. I'd personally love to see that. I'm certainly intrigued anyhow. And then we have another user here, Jackson Ryan, L. Ryan, saying, can you talk about that ridiculous idea from the director of Weapons for a damn henchman movie to take down a seasoned Batman with a Bat family and then to have Joker and Harley Quinn as side characters? So this is the thing. I'm seeing all kinds of different opinions all over the place of some people liking the idea and some people really not liking it. Now, I am somewhere in the middle, but possibly even leaning more towards the side of, okay, I think I can see the vision of what Zach Cregger's going for here, but I can also see how some people who don't like it are kind of viewing it through this lens of, oh, that doesn't sound interesting as a henchman. We're having these bigger villains as side characters. And this is the same thing as with all bloody things that get out there where everyone thought that it was like basically already pitched and already happening, already in development for the DCU. So it's not like this is happening. Although you could argue with Zach Cregger being quite a in-demand director these days, DC might be like, okay, maybe we need to have a talk with him. So we have a little bit of an update here from the Hollywood Reporter. This was on August 8th. And they go on to say, then there's one that's been getting attention online. HENCHMEN, a potential DC Studios movie that he's called the favorite script he's ever written, and which he penned before his 2022 breakout, Barbarian. So, first of all, I think it's pretty cool how, like, in his own time, he wrote this script, and he's never even pitched it, but it's like a DC script that he wrote out of just, pure passion, and he loves it so much that it is his favorite script he's ever written. Now, I know there's the controversial part of it. According to sources, because a lot of people thought that this was literally a DCU Joker and Harley project, HENCHMEN would center on a low-level henchman in the Gotham crime world who gains notoriety after managing to incapacitate Batman through a stroke of luck. The Dark Knight could appear briefly in the movie, while Harley Quinn and Joker are in the project as well. Cregger has not yet pitched it to DC Studios, though the company is said to be aware of his interest. But even with Cregger being one of the most in-demand filmmakers in town, like any IP swing, HENCHMEN faces several hurdles. DC Studios hasn't yet cast a Joker or a Batman. DC bosses Gunn and Safran likely want to be careful with anything Batman related, as we very well know, while they allow the Batman filmmaker Matt Reeves to make part 2. So all in all this has ever been is just like a cool thing that we learned about that was never and has never really been close to reality. And also, as the Hollywood Reporter point out, which is just common sense here, things are kind of still in flux with the whole Batman side of things, the wider Batverse side of things in the DCU, that just kind of randomly doing a henchman film where out of luck he kind of incapacitates Batman and gets a bit of popularity in the criminal underbelly. I can't imagine that's what they'd focus on in the next, 2 to 4 years at all. Now, as for the story itself, just out of hey, Boba, what do you think about his pitch? I'm normally on the opposite side of things when Joker got announced. People are like, why the hell do we need this movie? I liked the pitch there, and then it did very well, right? I liked the idea of getting into Arthur's life, this character study. I like these kind of pitches where you might hear henchmen, but I see potential. People might be like, oh yeah, I don't care about a henchman. Why would they make these bigger DC villain characters side characters? But that's the point, right? I actually find it interesting following a very low-level, street-level kind of henchman in the DC crime world of Gotham, where you follow the point-of-view-driven journey of how this character, out of sheer luck, manages to incapacitate Batman. Now, one thing I want to say there, because I get it. Batman being incapacitated by a henchman out of luck. I mean, no. Now, let me just say, they state that it was through a stroke of luck. So if it's a stroke of luck, they're acknowledging that it wouldn't have happened normally. You could argue that this movie was set during Batman Year 1 in the DCU or something like that, where I wouldn't hate the idea of when Batman is like 26, 27 on the streets, that out of sheer luck, a henchman or something manages to just do something and they're like, oh my god, but out of sheer almost intimidation still, it's not like they kill Batman, they run away. They run away because they're like, I can't believe I even began to survive this situation against the Bat, that he could come to at any moment and I need to get out of here. Like, it might not even be knocked unconscious, by the way. Maybe, like, you could argue there's just something that incapacitates him, like, gets him like that, and that gives the opportunity for this henchman to get away. Back to the main point here, I like the idea of experiencing the Gotham criminal underbelly, where you are seeing these other characters who are bigger characters, potentially, yes, even as side characters. That's not really been done before with the DC franchise, where you literally imagine like being a part of like Bane's crew or Joker's crew or something like that, and you're experiencing this on a much more visceral level. That is interesting to me. Just because you've got it on paper that, let's just say, arguably Bane or Joker or Harley would be clearly not the focus of the movie, but they're arguably on paper a more important comic book character than this henchman is, that doesn't mean that necessitates them and automatically qualifies them to be the main character of a movie. This is why, for example, kind of going back to Matt Reeves' Batman epic crime saga, I loved the idea of the GCPD pitch, because you don't often get many stories exploring a point of view perspective in the kind of everyday man in this criminal underbelly. So that would have followed a detective in a corrupt police department, but in the thick of the criminal underbelly of Gotham, coming across potentially larger characters, right, of the Batman mythos and villain lore. That is something I dig, because there's so much stuff to mine there. So just doing it instead through a henchman's perspective is pretty damn sick. I do want to stress again, like, apparently he penned this before his 2022 breakout Barbarian. So before DCU Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters was even announced. So, like, to stress, this movie was never necessarily and uniquely pitched for the DCU Batman, whoever that will be one day. The same Batman we're going to get in Brave and the Bold. He just wrote the script, and he was like, hopefully whoever, I guess Warner Brothers, you know, what at the time, he had no idea about the DCU ever coming into play. He's like, okay, maybe one day I can make this movie happen. And again, considering he penned it before 2022, maybe he was inspired after seeing Joker in 2019 that, hey, they've done Joker. That's not Jared Leto's, you know, DCEU Joker at the time. Not that he was, you know, coming about all the time, Jared Leto's Joker. But he was probably inspired, being like, oh, maybe I can write this screenplay. Hey, it happens to now be my most favorite screenplay I've ever written. And maybe one day they'll make it like they made Joker. But then, as we know, we got the Batman 2022, which makes this script as an Elseworld story much more unlikely. So all in all, would this ever happen? Maybe not. Because the only place it would fit into now is the DCU. Just considering the whole Batman side of things and how I don't think they're going to make another Batman Elseworlds film. So the only way it would fit in is a prequel DCU Batman tale of a henchman. Will that happen? X to doubt, I suppose, but maybe they're still going to pursue conversations with Zach Cregger, because he might be a filmmaker that Gunn would want to work at DC at some point. So Cloned Avenger says, do you think we'll see a well-known superhero from the comics be introduced in Peacemaker Season 2? Like, for example, Oliver Queen, Green Arrow. Now that Peacemaker's canon in the DCU, who knows what Gunn could surprise us with? Like, right now, the screeners are out, and I want everyone to know I haven't watched them as of when making this video, so I have no bloody idea at all. But the reason why I say all of that is because, you know, Gunn brought in the Justice League at the end of Peacemaker as a little fun thing, right? Now, we know they're they're no longer canon, but I'm just saying, who knows what he could do with season 2 now that this is DCU canon. And we already know there's big things from the trailers, like Hawk Girl, Guy Gardner. That's really cool that they brought them in, likely for a small role in that recruitment scene for more members. We already know Gunn said that there's another big cameo. Could it be Lex Luthor or someone else? Maybe even Superman himself? We don't know. But how mad would it be if he did bring in an entirely new hero that he plans to, use again one day, and a casting he absolutely felt confident about? Like, if we're ever going to do a Green Arrow thing, I wanted this actor. So I absolutely knew I could bring him in as a cameo in Peacemaker. Now, my only doubt about that, like Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, would be, if you're going to do an Oliver Queen and Green Arrow in the DCU, surely you want to make a bit more of a bigger deal out of the debut of that character in the cinematic live action sense, because of course we've had Stephen Amell on the CW, but we've never had a movie Green Arrow. So that would be pretty mad, and it's one of my most wanted things out of the DCU, that to kind of have him just appear in Peacemaker would be... It's not like I wouldn't like it, but it's like, is that really right? It's the same question as, should we really have Batman in the DCU appear in Clayface? Like, shouldn't he be reserved for his own debut movie, just like how Superman was? So, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be existing characters like Superman, Lex Luthor, the Justice Gang. But, who knows? Who knows what Gunn could have up his sleeve? So that Gothamite says, do you think that the Super Family sequel could lead into a third movie that sets up Connell as Superboy? Like Luthor tries to do the clone thing again, but decides to add his own DNA to make the clone more intelligent, as to not make the same mistake he did with Ultraman. So as for like the third movie after whatever this sort of sequel is, again, impossible to tell, but my headcanon for this has always been that if we ever do get a Superboy situation, I think that Luthor, it's not like he would do this in the future. I think it's already been going on. So like when he commissioned and started working on Ultraman, I think he also got another team to do another project at like a closed down kind of, or like covert location, possibly an off-site Cadmus lab situation, where they got him to combine his own DNA with Superman's. So essentially nothing that was ready in time for the events of the Superman movie. And that's totally believable. That he basically, put out his resources there into something that isn't really known. And it's not like we ever saw where they created Ultra. I mean, I guess we saw that like Labby-esque kind of place where Krypto was chasing the squirrels. But I believe this could be cooking in the background. I don't lean on it being an actual thing, but if they ever want to do it in the future and they ever introduce Superboy, they could easily write away the excuse of how, basically Luthor was up to this somewhere else and we never knew about it, and he cooked up a Superboy that was more of a perfected clone compared to how dumbed down Ultraman was. So Derek M293 asks, what expectations, if any, do you have for DC Studios at New York City Comic Con? I've been beating the drum for years that DC should make that their convention in the same way the MCU at its height made San Diego Comic Con theirs. I'm personally hoping that we get a first look at Lanterns and Supergirl, and hopefully a chapter slate update. That is basically what I expect as well. Like with Lanterns coming, like Gunn said basically a few weeks back or so in the press around Superman, that Lanterns will be coming out in a year or just under a year. So we're kind of thinking that Lanterns will probably release sometime around, April, May, June, somewhere in that 3-month block. So it's like, could we get something at October Comic-Con? I think we should. At the bare minimum, I'm just coming from the perspective of all we've had on Lanterns throughout the whole of its production is one picture of Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart walking down a road, probably to that town in the American heartland in Nebraska called Rushville. So I do kind of feel like we should get something, and that's a great place to show it. Like, it could just be something as small, I think it should be more than this, but it could be something as small as more looks, a couple more photos, maybe a poster, that'd be dope. But I do think they could put together a teaser, like a very small teaser if they wanted to keep it even more vague, but some kind of something in motion, like clip-wise, would be pretty sick. Supergirl, yes, there's, like, they have, I always say this about stuff, when they have it on the editing room floor in post-production, look at what the Batman achieved. Like, at 25 to 35% of that movie being shot. They can give us footage if they want to. It's just, are they going to do that? I think what we need to remember is Supergirl is, you know, I want to be hopeful and optimistic about something of substance because they really want that movie to do well. It's the next movie after Superman coming out next summer. So to gain hype for that, I personally would take what I like to call the Matt Reeves approach through just trinkling something. Like, it was so cool how, like, randomly he gave us 4 photos of Pattinson in the Batsuit by the Batmobile. I always use examples like this because the Batman's marketing was just so good. All it ever did was serve up hype and conversation. Superman, they kind of waited a long time before we got things of substance. Sure, we got like the crest up close that one time and that photo of him putting the suit on or the boot on or whatever it was. But Supergirl, we've had nothing. Lanterns, we've not really had anything much other than that one photo. So I think New York Comic Con needs to come out with something. A slate update. I can imagine information coming out of New York Comic Con and comments from Gunn could give us something like that, like where they're at with certain projects. Maybe he could tease us with more information about his project that he is writing right now. He did say that there are announcements and some projects to be greenlit, which we haven't heard about right now. Maybe he could officially divulge some of that information there. But speaking of New York Comic Con, I don't want to jump to things and be like, yeah, we're going to get a Lanterns trailer, like a proper official kind of trailer length 2-minute 30 thing. That would be dope. That's my pie in the sky New York Comic Con thing. Supergirl, I'm a bit more reserved about, but I am keeping in mind that they really want to get interest in that movie to get people excited. So remember the behind the scenes look we had of Superman? Something like that, where they kind of keep spoilery stuff fairly vague. You know, it's just some shooting or Millie in the Supergirl suit on the set. Maybe you could have Jason Momoa run in as Lobo. Maybe we could get the look of Lobo. I don't know. There's lots they can do. It's just what they're willing to do at that point in time. But I do feel like October is a sensible date to start giving us more. And San Diego Comic-Con, I understood why they didn't really want to do much there. But October, it's like, okay, things have moved along in multiple projects by that point where you can actually show us, if you want to, James Gunn. And in my opinion, like, even fan entitlement side of me aside, I think that's the right move to do in general. But I'm going to have to end this video here, guys. There are plenty more screenshots that I wanted to get to, but my camera keeps overheating because of the heat wave in the UK at the minute. And honestly, no windows open in this room, 3 lights on, my PC spitting out freaking heat from a 3090. Yeah, I can't get to more, even though this video is probably too long as it is. But let me know your thoughts on everything we got into in today's video regardless. I love reading your thoughts about this. This is what the whole point of this is for us all to kind of, as a community, get together and discuss the DCU and what's going on there. Like this video if you got this far. It really helps motivate me with these videos. It helps the channel as well, helps propel it out there to other people who may want to join in. And consider subscribing, because if you like DC, man, I think if you're at this point of the video, I think you should subscribe, because there's going to be a lot more where this came from. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to love you and leave you. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.